Thank you, Kyle Klinsky, for bringing this up. This is from the Cato Institute, conservative outlet. Ryan Reynolds. It's called Trump's $18 trillion hoax, the title. In addition to other false claims, President Donald Trump's recent Wall Street Journal article, "My Tariffs Have Brought America Back," once again repeated the grandiose but mysterious $18 trillion boast. "I have successfully wielded the tariff tool to secure colossal investments in America like no other country has ever seen before. In less than 1 year, we have secured commitments for more than $18 trillion, a number that is unfathomable to many." At the most recent cabinet meeting, SBA Administrator Kelly Loeffler parroted, "The $18 trillion you brought in created an economic boom like none we've ever seen before. We're going to have 7% GDP growth. GDP now is probably being underestimated where it is. Actually, the latest GDP now estimate from the New York Fed is 2.7%, but that muted boom was last year, and it only lasted 1 quarter. It tells us nothing about 2026. No matter how often Trump minions keep repeating it, this hyperbolic 18 trillion number is still as unfathomable to everyone who has tried to explain or find it. Not one of the several hundred economists in the White House and cabinet agencies has even tried to explain what the number is supposed to measure or how it was fabricated. What could it possibly mean to say that Trump brought in 18 million? That number is nearly as big as China's GDP in an entire year. Where did it come from? Where has it gone? In some fraction of this unseen 18 trillion that Trump brought in was already creating an economic boom, then why hasn't anyone shown us the booming economic statistics for manufacturing, employment, construction, or foreign investment? The mysterious 18 trillion boast of Trump loyalists cannot mean we are bringing in that much actual foreign direct investment, FDI. If it did, foreigners would have to acquire an extra 18 trillion in US dollars to finance all that new US plant and equipment in the USA, either by selling us much more than they buy from us, requiring much larger US trade deficits for many years, or by selling us huge amounts of their real or financial assets, convincing Americans to invest more abroad than they do at home. Of course, this is not happening. On the contrary, FDI was being brought in at a feeble annual rate of only $265.9 billion in the first 3 quarters of 2025, from the latest available. Figure 1 from the St. Louis Fed reveals that foreign direct investment grew 23% more rapidly during the Biden years, 2021 through 24, than it did in the first 3 quarters of 2025. Yet Trump nonetheless still boasts of 18 to 21 trillion in secured commitments from his coercive deals, unenforceable and unaffordable pledges made under the threat of steep tariffs or coercive pay-for-protection security schemes. Tariff extortion is the only way to plausibly attribute the fictional 18 trillion to his trade barriers. The only figure the White House has provided to back up all of his talk about incoming foreign investment was much smaller, 9.6 trillion, and only a fraction of that figure was foreign investment. Most of the investment was from U.S. firms, and many of the foreign plans were not about investments at all. Last year, the White House compiled a list of 132 private and foreign investment announcements made possible by President Trump's leadership. The headline claimed 9.6 trillion over many years due to the Trump effect. But most of the biggest investment plans were not brought in at all because Apple, Meta, Nvidia, Microsoft, Google, Micron, and IBM were already here. Eli Lilly, Pfizer, Merck, J&J, and AbbVie were here too. Foreign and domestic drug companies do have future investment and R&D plans in the U.S., but they always did, long before any Trump effect. Looking over the Trump effect list of 9.6 trillion, Bloomberg found only 3.5 trillion was from other countries, most of that being amorphous pledges. Items on the list were not commitments either, they were just announcements, apparently collected from searching the business news. Many items on the list, 2.9 trillion according to Bloomberg tally, were not even investments in any sense. Some were planned purchases of U.S. goods, others were just routine business expenses, such as expanding or upgrading facilities, training workers, conducting R&D, and even hiring workers. But every upbeat announcement, no matter how far off topic, was labeled a serious investment plan and added to the list of 132 projects attributed as a matter of faith to President Trump's leadership. The White House's Trump effect list of major investment announcements began with this bravado. Major investment announcements made possible by President Trump's leadership. The U.S. has seen a surge of private and foreign investment that are fueling job growth, innovation, and opportunity across every quarter of the country. Total U.S. and foreign investments, 9.6 trillion. Unfortunately, announcements are not even commitments, much less investments. As for the alleged surge of private investment, Figure 2 shows that growth of U.S. fixed investment in plant and equipment was relatively weak last year, just as Figure 1 showed incoming foreign investment was also below par. Real investment had been rapidly falling in manufacturing factories, the opposite of the president's familiar justification for high and erratic tariffs on imported manufactured goods to rebuild American manufacturing, right? Near the top of that list, however, is EU firms, the trade deal, $600 billion in various sectors for general investment. This is typically vague and therefore unverifiable. The art of the $600 billion deal to be clearly unclear about who is expected to be doing what and when. There were, of course, no names of EU firms that had supposedly agreed to spend big money on various and general projects, and no actual European companies could have agreed to write such a big blank checks, since private companies are not invited to political PR trade deals. Political leaders of EU nations cannot compel their private companies to invest in the U.S. to placate Trump, nor can they promise to tax or borrow money from their taxpayers to invest in U.S. private companies. Many of the 132 announcements on the White House $9.6 trillion list were not about investments at all, but about foreigners promising to buy more U.S. product. In one so-called investment announcement, Japan's largest electric power company, GERA, pledged to buy $200 billion of LNG from the U.S. So what? Many power companies everywhere rely heavily on U.S. natural gas, liquefied or not. This is just a Japanese import, not investment. India was said to be investing $500 billion in mutual trade expansion, whatever that is, and it's not an investment. Two countries agreeing to do more bilateral exporting and importing is not foreign investment in the U.S. The largest genuine investment plans, implausibly attributed to Trump's leadership or tariffs rather than the invention of AI, are investments in technology by AI, by Amazon, Meta, Apple, Micron, IBM, and Google. Other multi-million-dollar long-term investment plans, including R&D by major pharmaceutical firms, but R&D is nothing new, just doing what drug companies always do, keep growing. Numerous other investments in the White House Trump effect list are described as manufacturing expansion or upgrading manufacturing facilities. But that sort of investment is made all the time, even during recessions, and even by companies that are shutting down other facilities. He said one line shows Heinz investing $3 billion to upgrade manufacturing facilities, while the next line adds Kraft Heinz also investing another $3 billion to upgrade manufacturing facilities. Whoever did this data entry, plus their editors, evidently did not realize that they are one company, not two. So this kept happening in there. He said, at some point, by the art of doubling down on meaningless nonsense, the $9.6 trillion statistical fraud somehow became magically transformed into the even more unfathomable number of $18 trillion, a figure not one of the hundreds of economists employed by the White House, Treasury, or Commerce departments ever attempted to validate. Yet this is total imaginary $18 trillion political talking point continues to be repeated endlessly in the hope that nobody in the public or press would ever be brave enough to rudely ask someone for an explanation or shred of evidence. I have said it often. Can we see proof? Where's that money? Where is it? Where? I thought somebody in Congress was looking for it.